So there was two little boys, and they were best friends at church. But they both had a reputation for getting into trouble. And so one of the Sundays, one of the boys was homesick. But the other boy, not wanting to let his friend down, decided he should be twice as much trouble. And as he was running through the sanctuary after church, the pastor grabbed him and angrily said, "Where's God?" The little boy was frightened and didn't know what to say. The pastor continued, "I want you to go home and think about it, and I don't want you to come back until you can tell me, where's God?" Well, the little boy went home, and he called his sick friend on the telephone and said, "Guess what? They've lost God, and they're trying to blame that one on us too." So I don't really know what the answer that the preacher was looking for was, but it's a great introduction to the 5 basic unity principles, which we're going to be looking at for the next 5 weeks. Because the first one is that there's one presence and one power in the universe, God the good. So therefore the answer is, as our children know, God is everywhere. That's the answer. Way to go. So the unity answer, like I said, is the question is where everything, everywhere, everyone, all of it. Now, this concept can be kind of big to grasp for some and as easy as pie for others. It really has a lot to do with the theology you've walked into this room with. So, but this is really important, and that's why it's principle number 1, because it's the foundation. If you don't get any of the rest of the stuff that unity is about, this is the one. Now, unity does not teach that there's a Zeus/Santa Claus type God in the sky who's granting wishes and hurling thunderbolts, which is kind of the traditional view of God. Emily Cady, who was one of Unity's first writers and whose book Lessons in Truth helped shape the New Thought movement, wrote, "God is not a being or a person having life, intelligence, love, power. God is that invisible, intangible, but very real something we call life. God is perfect love and infinite power. God is the total of these, the total of all good, whether manifested or expressed or unexpressed." So when we take away all traces of personality or of needing to be appeased and the inability to influence, God becomes a stable principle. Now, it's not easy to take away all references to God as a being or an entity. It seems to be in our nature to make more human, plenty of non-human entities, right? We read all sorts of narratives into our pets, right? We say the computer is thinking or having a bad day. Does anybody? I've had a few arguments with the copy machine. And many folks name their cars. So why wouldn't we make God in our image? It just seems to be what we do, is make things in our image. So why wouldn't we explain away things that we don't understand by attributing it to some entity outside of ourselves? Now, just because we teach that there's one presence and one power doesn't mean that we don't experience dualism. Because what we're saying with this principle is that in the bigger absolute realm, this is true. The zoomed out bigger picture, there is one presence. However, because we are all in different amounts of believing in separation from God and from each other, we experience separation. Did you catch all of that? So, in the big zoomed out version, like if you look at the earth from zoomed out far, it You see there's no separation, there's no lines, there's no counties or countries or states or any of that, right? There's just the earth. But when you zoom in, you can see those lines, and that's kind of how we experience God. In the big version, there is no lines to separate. But when we get close, we believe that there's separation, and therefore we experience it that way. And we're conditioned to that way from the very beginning of our lives. So it's not like any of us messed up. It's the way we're conditioned, and so we have to change that. So as we journey into the 5 principles some more, we will explore more about these ideas and ask questions such as, why do bad things happen to good people? People want to know the answer to that. You'll have to come back next week. But today, we're going to stick with one presence, one power. Now, when I was younger, I would hear the saying, there is no spot where God is not. It's kind of a cute little way to say it. There is no spot where God is not. And this means that the energy of God is in everything in the universe. Everything. So what would it look like to truly believe that and live it? Well, science has already, they're here with the answer, right? Science tells us that everything is matter. If you dig down deep, we're all atoms and molecules held together by gravity and electromagnetic charge, but mostly we're space. Everything. You're sitting on space, right? But not just you and me, but everything we experience, from the mountains to the mosquitoes to a black hole to a blueberry, are all the same stuff, all the same matter. Isn't that neat when science proves what we've been saying? It's all the same. So it's quite simple. It's also quite a stretch for some people, as it butts heads with a theology that requires supplication or conformity to experience goodness. But Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, she wrote, God is already in every part of your being, so it's just a matter of being conscious with your oneness with God. It's just a matter of being conscious of oneness with God. She makes it sound so simple, right? And it is, and it's not. This is the journey we're here to take together. We come together as a spiritual community to encourage and learn from one another and to practice living more of that and help us get back on the path when we might have got a little sidetracked. So we can practice knowing our oneness together. So how do we cultivate that? How do we live and practice in this knowledge of oneness? Well, we practice. You all knew that was coming, right? So here's what practice looks like. So the other day, I saw a bumper sticker that started to push my buttons, because essentially it said that a certain group of people should die. Yeah, so it pushed my buttons. If ever there was a statement showing how separate we've become as a culture, it would be one saying that another group of people, just because of who they are, should die. So I have a choice. Well, you know, you're sitting there waiting to turn out of Costco, and you know you're not getting out anytime soon, so you're like, okay, well, I get to do something with this, right? Because, you know, Saturday, Costco parking lot, right? So I can sit in judgment about how this person in front of me is stupid, ignorant, etc., etc., etc. Some other words that are not appropriate for church Sunday platform. But then you see, the trouble is, then I'm contributing to that energy of other and separateness. So what if I paused and checked in with myself, have some self-empathy? What am I feeling? Concern, frustration, bewilderment? What kinds of feelings might influence someone else to say something like what they had on their bumper sticker? Can I have empathy for that? Maybe they're feeling a lot of fear or uncertainty about the world. They've probably been conditioned in some way or another to feel that way too. Just like I've been conditioned to see everyone as a beloved. So, as I'm sitting there in line to get out of the Costco parking lot, the question is, can I extend compassion to this person because I too know what it feels like to feel fear for the safety of those I care about the most? Could I choose in my own heart and mind not to join the energy of fear and hate or mistrust that these kind of statements seem to rile up, and instead choose love, understanding, compassion? And I'm not telling you that it's easy. I'm telling you that it's necessary. It is true that there is one presence and one power in the universe, and it's inherently good. However, many, if not most people, have forgotten this truth, and many are very far from knowing this oneness and acting accordingly. But we still get to choose our response. We still get to act from our knowing of our oneness or from our delusion of separateness. Every day we get to choose. Every moment, every bumper sticker, we get to choose. Oneness, separation. So I can go with separateness and a need to make this other driver wrong and stupid, which will make me feel safe because they're different and they're wrong and stupid. Or I can choose to see them as a fellow part of the universe, going about as well as they know how, and affirming healing and understanding. My responsibility is to do what Myrtle taught and practice becoming more conscious of my oneness with God. How do we do this? Meditation and spiritual practice. You knew it was coming. So when we stay grounded in our spiritual practice and we can bring ourselves back to our oneness, these day-to-day, potentially inflaming and frustrating situations, they roll off like a water off a duck. You got to shake it off. Not that you become unaware of what's happening in the world, because we can't become unaware of what's happening in the world, but that you can see the deeper truth and are able to respond in a more compassionate, loving, and ultimately more helpful way. When instead of responding from fear, we can respond from understanding and wisdom. When you're standing in principle of knowing the oneness of the universe, you don't have to get washed up in the drama and instead can act. So, as the political season continues to invade our world, and it's a great time to get into the habit of quiet prayer and meditation, and just to turn things off, and to get great time to practice doing the shake off. For those of you who haven't been to metaphysics, this is actually Sheila's thing. She started it.
Giving me credit.
The shake off. But she's right. So we can allow the world to hijack us and continue to enforce a belief in separateness and otherness in something that's we need to fear, or we can choose to not. We can choose to say, well, that's nice information, thank you for sharing, and come back to the truth of knowing that there is nothing to fear, that the universe is a safe place, that God is good, and the universe, and that's all there is. So there you go. Next week, why do bad things happen to good people? But for this week, remember, there's principle number one, the most important. There is one presence and one power in the universe, God, the good.